You know, sometimes the most beautiful lives, the ones that sparkle on the outside, hide the deepest cracks inside. This story starts in a quiet, affluent neighborhood, manicured lawns, luxury cars, wide smiles behind high fences, and behind one of those fences lived Jonathan and Elise Carter. To the outside world, they were the image of perfection. A well-dressed, successful husband, a poised, graceful wife, a home so well kept it looked like it had leaped out of a lifestyle magazine. But perfection is a costume, and Elise was tired of pretending that Jonathan was a corporate executive, sharp, charming, the kind of man who turned heads when he entered a room, the kind of man who lived for the chase, but forgot how to cherish what he'd caught. Elise, on the other hand, was quieter, thoughtful. She had traded her career in interior design for motherhood, for hosting Jonathan's business dinners, for folding away pieces of herself like linens no one used anymore. She was elegant, radiant, even but invisible to the one person who should have seen her most. And it didn't happen overnight. It never does. First came the late work meetings, then the weekend trips for networking, then the birthdays missed, the cold silences, the glances at his phone during dinner, and then came her, Madison, the new secretary, young, confident, too eager. Elise noticed the way Jonathan spoke about her, first with professional praise, then with defensiveness, and then not at all. Elise noticed the perfume on his collar one night. Expensive. Not hers. She said nothing. Not at first, because women like Elise are trained to second-guess themselves, to be the peacekeepers, to preserve the illusion. But illusions crack, and hers did. The night Jonathan came home late, too late, and had the audacity to smell like someone else's lipstick. She asked him, plainly, "Are you sleeping with her?" Jonathan blinked. Just once. And then shrugged. Shrugged. That's what Elise got in return for 11 years of loyalty. A shrug. That night, something inside her shifted. The next day Elise woke up before dawn. The sun hadn't even painted the sky, yet she made coffee, fed the dog, and watched Jonathan sleep, peacefully, as if nothing had broken. And in that silence, she made her choice. She wouldn't scream, she wouldn't throw things, she wouldn't beg, she would leave, and she would leave, and she would do it so quietly, so perfectly, that Jonathan wouldn't even notice. Until she was gone, it took her 2 weeks. 2 weeks to plan everything: the lawyer, the storage unit, the apartment lease under her maiden name. She moved her savings, set up auto-pay on the bills, labeled every folder, and then, one morning, when Jonathan left for work, she packed her final bag, took her wedding ring off the nightstand, left it on a note card. Just one sentence, in her handwriting. "I know about her, and I know about me. I deserve better." She walked out the front door. No drama, no witnesses. Just freedom. Jonathan came home that night, expecting dinner, maybe another round of icy silence. Instead, he found nothing. The house was clean, quiet. Quiet. The note sat there like a loaded gun. He read it once, then again, and again. "I know about her, and I know about me. I deserve better." His stomach dropped. He called her phone, straight to voicemail, called her mother, her best friend, her sister. No one answered. He didn't know yet that Elise had already boarded a plane destination unknown. All he could think to do was call Madison, the woman he had chosen to destroy his marriage for. She didn't answer either. It was the first time in a long time Jonathan had felt alone, but it wouldn't be the last. They say you don't know what you have until it's gone. But Jonathan, he didn't even know what he had while he had it. 3 days had passed since Elise vanished. The house once humming with soft music, the scent of vanilla candles, and the warmth of her touch now felt like a museum, cold, silent, sterile. He tried to call her again. Still nothing. He paced the house like a ghost in his own life. He opened drawers, closets, the pantry. Everything was too clean, too precise. She hadn't left in a fit of rage. She had planned this carefully, thoughtfully, like a woman who had already grieved the death of her marriage long before it died. Jonathan didn't realize yet. Elise hadn't just left, she had outgrown him. Madison texted him that afternoon, "Just checking in. Is everything okay?" He stared at the message for a long time before typing, "She's gone." Madison didn't respond, not for hours. When she finally did, it was 2 words. "I'm sorry." That was it. No follow-up, no offer to come over, asking how he felt. And in that moment, it hit him: Madison wasn't a replacement. She was a distraction, an escape from responsibility, from boredom, from himself. But Elise, she had been his anchor. And now he was adrift. Jonathan's mother called the next day. She'd heard from Elise's sister John. She's not coming back. He tried to sound unaffected, dismissive, but his voice cracked when he said, "It's fine. She just needs time." His mother paused, then said gently, "No, honey, she doesn't need time. She needed you on. You weren't there." He hung up. And for the first time, the tears came, not because Elise left, but because he finally understood why she did. For days, Jonathan lived in that house like a stranger. He walked into the bedroom and stared at the empty space where Elise's jewelry box once sat. He opened the bathroom cabinet and found it half empty. Her lotion, her perfume, her presence gone. He scrolled through photos on his phone. Vacations, anniversaries, her smile frozen in time. He remembered how she used to place her hand on his chest when they danced in the kitchen, how her laughter used to fill the hallway, and he remembered the exact moment he stopped paying attention, not because he didn't love her, but because he thought she'd always be there. One morning, he opened his inbox and saw a message from Elise's attorney, subject line, "Formal separation notification, no warmth, no drama, just details." Attached was a list, assets, property, a proposed settlement. Jonathan stared at the screen for an hour before calling the number. The assistant answered. "She's not taking personal calls." And that's when it hit him again. She wasn't playing games. This wasn't a test. This was her liberation. He showed up at Madison's place that night, flowers in one hand, desperation in the other. But when she opened the door, the look on her face said everything. Pity, double quotes, "John, I didn't sign up for this. I didn't think it would go this far." "You didn't think I'd actually lose her?" he asked, voice sharp. "I didn't think she'd be strong enough to leave you." That cut deeper than she knew. He stood there, silent. She handed the flowers back. "I'm not her, John. I can't fix what you broke." She closed the door. And Jonathan stood there, flowers in hand, dignity in pieces. He didn't know it yet, but that moment would replay in his mind for the rest of his life. Days blurred into each other. The house fell apart. The fridge was empty, the sink piled up with dishes. The silence grew louder. And one night, unable to sleep, Jonathan went into Elise's old studio room, the space she once used for her design projects. It was the only room she hadn't completely cleared out. He found a journal, leather-bound, worn. He knew he shouldn't read it, but he did. The entries were quiet, confessions. "I miss him, but I don't recognize him anymore. It hurts more when he forgets to lie. Sometimes I wonder if I'm just invisible now, if he even sees me when I speak. I gave up dreams to be someone's dream, but I don't think I was ever his. I love him, but I love me too, and I'm tired of waiting for him to love me back." Jonathan sank to the floor, her words slicing through his chest like glass. This wasn't just about the affair. It was about the erosion of trust, of connection, of respect. It was about the slow death of a woman's spirit and how he had been too self-absorbed to notice. By the end of the week, Jonathan tried to call Elise again, one last time. The phone rang. And this time it didn't go straight to voicemail. It rang. Once, twice, three times. Then, "This number has been disconnected." She was really gone. Not just from the house, but from him. There's a kind of silence that doesn't scream or slam doors, that it just closes them, for good. And when Elise walked out that door, she didn't just leave a man behind. She left the version of herself who thought staying small was the price of being loved. She arrived in Asheville, North Carolina, under the cover of a gray morning sky. A small town, quiet, unassuming. It was nothing like the pristine suburb she'd left behind. But that was the point. Elise didn't want polish, wanted peace. She rented a small loft downtown, one with creaky floors, sun-warmed windows, and space that felt honest. She hung up wind chimes, lit candles, and on the very first night she slept better than she had in years. She had left her marriage, yes, but she had also left the version of herself that begged for crumbs of affection from a man who only looked up from his phone to criticize her. It started with small things: coffee from the corner shop, where the barista remembered her name by day 3, walks through the art district, where murals bled color into her soul again. She found a local art cop offering shared studio space. She signed up the same day. For the first time in 11 years, Elise held a paintbrush without guilt. She didn't worry about dinner being late, or the wine being uncorked, or whether she looked presentable when he walked in the door, because no one was coming through that door anymore, just her. And she was, funnily enough, one afternoon, while sorting through storage boxes, Elise found an old folder of unfinished design sketches dreams she had shelved when she became Mrs. Carter. She stared at them for a long while, then opened her laptop. A few clicks later, she purchased a domain name .eliseincolor.com. No fanfare, no big announcement, just a quiet promise to herself, I'm not disappearing again. Word spread fast in the Coupelisse's minimalist, emotionally expressive style was unlike anything the town had seen. She was soon invited to exhibit at a small local gallery. The night of her first show, she stood under soft lights, surrounded by strangers who saw her art and not once asked about her husband. A woman in her 60s with silver curls approached her and said, "Your work, it feels like freedom and sadness holding hands." Elise smiled, eyes stinging. That's exactly what it is. Freedom doesn't come easy, it comes in waves. There were nights she still cried, still woke up reaching for someone who wasn't there, still questioned whether she'd done the right thing. But each time she did, she read her own journal entries. She reminded herself that she hadn't walked away from love, she'd walked away from neglect. There's a difference, and women, especially, are taught to endure, to excuse, to rationalize. But not Elise. Not anymore. Meanwhile, Jonathan was unraveling. He'd tried therapy once, left halfway through, tried dating twice. Neither woman stayed past dinner. Work. He was there, but not present. People noticed. Whispers spread. He's not the same since she left. He saw Elise's art website one night. He couldn't help himself. He saw her name at the bottom of a painting, dedicated to the woman I had to become to save myself. That line punched the air from his lungs. He realized something no man ever wants to admit. She became more alive the moment she left me back in Asheville. Elise's second show sold out. She was invited to speak at a local women's workshop about rediscovering purpose after personal loss. She hesitated. Public speaking had never been her thing. But then she remembered all the nights she sat in silence, swallowed her words, and dimmed her light. So she said yes. She stood on a stage, in front of 60 women, and began with this: I used to believe that if I gave enough love, I'd finally feel loved in return. What I didn't realize was I was loving someone who never learned to receive, and I was starving while calling it devotion. The room was so still you could hear tears hit the floor. Afterward, women lined up just to hug her. One whispered, "You just told my story." Another cried and said, "You gave me permission to leave." That night, Elise didn't feel broken. She felt whole, not because she was fixed, but because she finally knew she had never been the problem. She still thought of Jonathan sometimes, not with hatred, but with the kind of sadness you feel when you visit a childhood home and realize it was always smaller than you remembered. He had been her entire world once. Now, he was just a chapter. A year passed. One evening, Elise received an email from Jonathan. Just one line, "Where's my wife?" She stared at it for a long time, and then, with steady hands, she replied, "She left the day you moved your secretary in, and the woman who took her place doesn't want to come back." No anger, no poetry, just the truth. Jonathan replied again. This time, "I was a fool." And for the first time in her life, Elise didn't feel the urge to fix someone else's regret. She simply closed the laptop, lit a candle, and returned to her canvas, because closure doesn't always come in forgiveness. Sometimes it comes in finally choosing yourself. Regret is a slow poison that it doesn't strike all at once. It seeps quietly, steadily, and for Jonathan Carter, it seeped into every corner of the house he used to share with Elise. It had been 14 months since she left. The walls still echoed. Her absence, her laughter never returned. Her scent had long faded. Even the dog, an old golden retriever they adopted together, had stopped waiting by the door. Jonathan had tried to move on, tried the usual distractions work, dating, pretending. But time has a cruel way of forcing you to sit with yourself. And that's what he feared the most. Because who was Jonathan without Elise? Not the powerful executive, not the charismatic man about town. He was just a man who destroyed something beautiful for him, something temporary. He didn't just lose a wife. He lost the last person who believed he was more than what he appeared to be. One morning, Jonathan opened the closet and realized he hadn't worn half his clothes in months. There was dust on the shelf where Elise used to fold his sweaters. He sat down on the bed and stared at the spot where she once slept. He remembered something, morning when she was running late and accidentally sprayed dry shampoo on his dress shoes instead of hers. They had laughed for 10 minutes. He missed that laugh like oxygen. And yet, when he had it, he never valued it. He tried reaching out again. An email, longer this time, not demanding, not dramatic, just honest. I don't expect forgiveness. I just want you to know that I see it now. Everything. The dinners I ignored. The dreams you shelved. The kindness you gave me when I deserved silence. You didn't leave because you were angry. You left because I gave you no reason to stay, and I will carry that for the rest of my life. He hovered over the send button. Then clicked it. Not for her, for him, because the truth was, he hadn't just betrayed Elise, he had betrayed himself. He started going to therapy seriously this time. At first, he showed up tight-lipped and guarded, but over time, he started unraveling the layers. He talked about his childhood, how he'd been taught that showing emotion made him weak, how his father always measured success in money, never in love, how Elise was the first person who ever made him feel seen, and how that terrified him. His therapist asked, "Do you think you pushed her away? Because deep down, you didn't believe you were worthy of being loved like that?" Jonathan didn't answer, but the tears did. Meanwhile, in Elise's life had quietly blossomed. She launched a collection called The Ones Who Leave, a series of paintings inspired by stories sent to her by women around the world. Each piece was a visual narrative, a door left open, a suitcase by the window, a heart stitched back together with gold. The collection went viral. Suddenly, Elise was being interviewed on podcasts, featured in art blogs. Her name was whispered in creative circles as the woman who turned heartbreak into healing. But none of that mattered as much as the quiet messages she received daily. "Because of you, I walked away too. Your story helped me find mine. I didn't think I was brave enough. Then I saw you. That was the true success. Not fame, not money. Legacy. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was leading. Jonathan saw the articles. Read every word. Watched the interviews in silence. In one, the host asked Elise, "If you could say one thing to the person you left behind, what would it be?" She paused, smiled softly, and said, "Thank you, because losing him gave me back myself." That night, Jonathan poured a glass of wine, but he didn't drink it. He placed it down and just sat. No distractions, no excuses, just the man he was, and the one he had pretended to be. He started journaling, not to win her back, but to understand what made him lose her in the first place. His first entry read, "She didn't leave because she stopped loving me. She left because I stopped showing her she mattered." Months passed. Jonathan became quieter, softer, more aware. He volunteered at a local mentorship group for young men. He started reading books on empathy, connection, emotional intelligence. He sold the house, bought a modest apartment near the lake. Sometimes he'd sit on the balcony and wonder what Elise would say if she saw him now. Would she believe he'd changed? Would she care? But he never reached out again, because part of loving someone, truly loving them, is respecting the life they've built without you. And Elise, she was invited to showcase her work in Paris. Her passport, once dusty, was now well used. She met people who saw her not as someone's ex-wife, but as an artist, a speaker, a whole human being. She smiled more now, laughed without apology. She had friends, projects, peace. One evening, sipping tea under Golden City lights, a woman next to her asked, "Are you married?" Elise paused, then smiled. "I was." "What happened?" She sipped her tea and said, "He brought someone else into our home, and I finally brought myself out of it." She didn't say it with bitterness, she said it with freedom, because healing isn't loud. Sometimes, it's as quiet as finally being able to say the truth, without pain. Years passed, not in a blur but in the kind of quiet clarity that only time, pain, and deep healing can create. Elise had not just rebuilt her life, she had redesigned it, deliberately stone by stone, by stone. Color by color, choice by choice. She no longer lived in reaction to someone else's needs, moods, or mistakes. She lived from her center, her truth. Her studio was now a sanctuary. The walls were covered in canvas. The air smelled like paint and jasmine. A record player spun Nina Simone in the background. She no longer flinched at old memories. In fact, she welcomed them, because Those memories no longer held power. They were pages in a story she had finished reading. One autumn morning, she received a letter, not an email, a handwritten letter, postmarked from Chicago. It was from Jonathan, just 3 pages. No pleading, no manipulation. Just him. Raw. Asterisk. I don't write this to ask for anything. I write this because it would be dishonest to pretend that I didn't become a better man after losing you. You were never the reason. I felt small. You were the reason I had the chance to grow, and I ruined it. I want you to know that the man I am now finally sees the woman I once had, and if the only thing I can offer is a lifetime of silent gratitude from afar, then I offer it without hesitation. Asterisk. Elise read it twice, then folded it gently, placed it in a drawer, and returned to her painting. Not because she didn't feel anything, but because she no longer needed closure. She was the closure. That night, she gave a talk at a women's retreat in the mountains. The room was filled with women, some still in relationships they feared leaving, others freshly broken, all of them searching for something that felt like home inside themselves. Elise walked onto the stage. No script, just truth. She stood in the center, looked at them, and said, I left a man I loved, not because he cheated, but because long before that, he stopped seeing me. I stayed too long. I begged too quietly. I dimmed too often. And one day, I realized I didn't recognize the woman in the mirror, so I left, not to hurt him, but to find her again. And what I found was more than I ever imagined. Because when a woman finally chooses herself, she becomes unstoppable. Asterisk. The room erupted into applause, but Elise, she didn't need the noise. She had already heard the loudest applause, the sound of her own soul, whispering, you did it. You came back to life. Back in Chicago, Jonathan stood by the lakeside, a new man, not a perfect man, but a present one. He no longer chased Elise in his mind. He honored her. He honored the memory of who they were, the good, the bad, the parts that broke, the parts that built. He dated here and there. He learned how to listen, how to be soft. He loved his life now, even if it looked nothing like the one he'd imagined. But one thing was certain, he would never again take love for granted. One evening, walking home from dinner with friends, he heard a familiar song playing in a passing car, Elise's favorite, a classic Billie Holiday track. He smiled, not with longing, but with gratitude, because some people don't come back. They wake you up, and Elise had done exactly that. Later that year, Elise published a book, a memoir, wrapped in poetry, essays, and artwork. It was called The Day I Left Was the Day I Came Home. It debuted at #1 in her category. But again, the numbers weren't the point. The point was that every page she wrote, every word, every tear was for the woman she used to be, for the women reading it now, and for the women who had yet to leave, but would. One day, at a signing in New York, a young woman handed her a dog-eared copy of the book. She whispered, you saved me. Elise took her hand and said, no, sweetheart, you saved you. I just lit a little lantern on the path. And that's exactly what Elise had become. Not a victim, not even just a survivor, but a light for anyone walking through the dark. Final narration to the audience. Voiceover style. So if you're listening to this right now, if you're in the middle of your own unraveling, if you're asking, where did they go? Or worse, what happened to me? Let this be your reminder. You don't need their permission to choose yourself. You don't need their apology to move on. You don't need to keep shrinking to be loved. Love real. Love doesn't ask you to disappear. It celebrates your fire. It sees you. And if someone refuses to, then the most powerful thing you can do is walk away. Not in anger, not in revenge, but in full, beautiful, radiant freedom. Because sometimes the greatest love story is the one you finally write with yourself.